What was your mindset when you were pushing yourself through those moments of self doubt? How did you work to motivate yourself through those really difficult times?
There's something powerful about people not believing in you and you finding the strength to say, you know what? I'm just going to have to show you, right? And there's a lot of, you have to have that self confidence. There's a lot of fake it until you make it. I knew going to law school that my criminal background may prevent me from becoming a lawyer, but I did it anyway. Don't ever let anyone dim your light. As I've grown older, it's like, I think, being your true authentic self is everything. And then when it's not authentic, I think people can spot it and people can see it.
Welcome to The O Word, a podcast for overachievers by overachievers. I'm your host, Stephanie Lin. And on this show, we explore the mindset behind extraordinary achievement and the habits, decisions, and risks that help ambitious people unlock their greatest potential. And each episode gives you insights from leaders, creators, entrepreneurs on how they stand out and build meaningful success. And today's guest, I'm so excited for you to meet her. She is powerhouse attorney Anh Phoong, whose bold billboards have become some of the most recognizable legal advertising in California.
When something goes wrong, call me, Anh Phoong.
And in this conversation, you're going to learn how she built a powerful personal brand, the risks she took along the way, and the lessons she's learned about ambition, confidence, and redefining success. So let's get right into it. And I'm so excited to have you here. And you're such an overachiever that you're taking this call in between meetings.
Oh, yes. Thank you for having me. Yes. This is something that it's like when you don't have a million things to do, you can't get anything so it's like, let's fit it all in.
And when you look back at your younger years, were you always somebody who had that overachiever mindset, or is this something that you developed a little later on?
I think it was always in my heart because I grew up watching my parents work, as immigrants and, day in and day out. They worked every single day, 15, 16 hours a day. So I knew what hard work looked like. But growing up, it wasn't until later on in my pursuit of, my legal career where I really, truly, realized I was an overachiever. And my mom was like a homemaker. She didn't have anything for herself, but she always, if you're washing dishes, if you're doing laundry, you got to be the best dishwasher. You got to be the best at doing laundry. So, and I remember that at a very young age.
Why do you think it was so important for them to impart those lessons to you growing up at a young age?
Yeah, I think coming to America, they knew that, whatever opportunity we had here was going to be better, and they would have to work just as hard or even harder to make it. I remember being, 8 or 9 years old, learning how to. So the trade that they learned was landscaping. And so we would mow lawn and we'd had a route. And it wasn't so much like, oh, we're going to teach our kids how to earn a living. There was no babysitter. We couldn't afford it. And we were very low income, like for, I don't know, the first 10, 15 years. We were on, food
Mm.
stamps, government assistance until we can get on our own feet. But I think that they knew that if we're going to make it in America, you kids now have this opportunity. You can't just take it for granted. So you have to go out and, in a sense, kind of, make that their journey worth it too, right? I think that's a lot of like the immigrant story is like, we came here for a better life for our kids. And so here, make yourself a better life.
Was there a defining moment for you when you realized that law was the path you wanted to pursue?
I recently have started sharing a little bit more about my journey. And for the longest time, there was a lot of shame behind it because it wasn't something that, I can talk about and prance and parade and say. But over the last year, I've just learned that I really need to share this part of my story, no matter how dark it is. But so I actually was a part of the justice system on the criminal side.
Mm.
And in my younger years, when I was always a little girl that wanted to please her parents and make my parents happy. When I was growing up, it was all about what they wanted for me. I knew I had to go to school, and once I graduated high school, started learning I had my own voice, started, rebelling a little bit, being a little bit delinquent and challenging, there's authority and I wasn't just listening to mom and dad. And so in that era of my life, I made poor decisions. I definitely was in a dark period of my life and I was stealing and I stole several times and got caught and I landed in jail and I actually served time. And so when I say I was part of the justice system, Like, I really went through it. So I had a public defender who was like, young lady, like I was 20 at the time. And he's like, "You're ruining your life. What are you doing?" It's like, you're throwing your life away." And it was that moment when the first moment that I thought, wow, this stranger, complete stranger, who's my attorney, but I didn't really know him, wanted to help me. He's like, "You need to wake up. This is going to be the rest of
Mhm.
your life. And you don't want to be, one of the people that keep coming in and back and forth." And
Mm.
so that was like the first sign that I was like, you know what? I knew after I served, spent some time there, I was never going back, first of all. I learned my lesson. Um, and then I realized, like, I wanted to be a part of the system in a way like that public defender. I wanted to help people. It just sparked an interest in me. And that's kind of the first real time when I realized, like, I want to go into the legal field.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know that was a personal story and it's not always easy to exercise vulnerability, but it really is a defining moment, it sounds like, for you. I mean, what was that experience like, given that you had grown up with parents who had, it sounds like, very high expectations for you? Did that change your relationship with your parents at all?
They were obviously disappointed. They didn't really know. I hid a lot from them when I had come home and told them I was turning my life around. There definitely was hesitation. They're like, "Oh, well, let's see," right? And it hurt, but it also was very warranted, because I had let them down in a sense, right? And I was, during those dark moments, I felt like I had a lot to prove to them, and like I wanted their approval again. And so, um, I don't blame them, but once I was actually got into law school, which is another journey, um, they were fully supportive.
What was your mindset when you were pushing yourself through those moments of self doubt? Obviously, working to prove your parents and your peers wrong. How did you work to motivate yourself through those really difficult times?
There's something powerful about people not believing in you and finding the strength to say, you know what? I'm just going to have to show you. Right. And there's a lot of, you have to have that self confidence. There's a lot of fake it until you make it. I mean, there was moments that up and down where I was like, oh man, maybe I can't be a lawyer. Maybe this is too crazy. I mean, you have to understand that having a criminal background and then trying to be a part of the California State Bar, do you know how
Mm,
challenging that was? That was almost like 0%, like 5% maybe. I knew going to law school that my criminal background may prevent me from becoming a lawyer, but I did it anyway because that's
mhm.
how bad I wanted to be a lawyer. And I took that risk. And so, my everyone that knew was like, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "There's nothing else I want in life but this." So I was going to give it 100% and let's see where the cards fall. And so, like I said, there's times when I doubted myself. There's times when people doubted me, and it was like I would look at a lot of self affirmation, and I would tell myself, like, "You can do this, Anne. You're a badass. You can do it." And I started that because, like, I needed to hear it. I wasn't getting it from, necessarily people around me, and it wasn't that they weren't trying to. It's just like I don't think they knew what I needed. I don't think I knew what I needed,
Mhm.
until I would just like look myself in the mirror. I would write it down. Like when I took the bar. One of the first things I did was on a big poster board, it wrote, "Anne, you can and you will pass the California State Bar." And even though, like, there's days where I felt like there's no way I could pass it, I would read that and say it 10 to 20 times until I actually started believing it. And so manifestation and having that confidence, even if it's a little fake or, like you have to like fake it till you make it. And there's a lot of times and then that grows into that self-confidence that you actually need and you develop it.
It's just incredible and so important, the power of just being your own cheerleader. I think sometimes people who overachieve and have these very performance based identities, they tend to subconsciously or perhaps unsubconsciously rely a lot on external validation. Maybe they grew up working really hard to please their parents. And so they're always
Mhm.
maybe expecting superiors at work to be like, oh, you did a great job. But a lot of times in the workforce, that doesn't always happen. Can you maybe offer some advice to folks who might be struggling with that a little bit?
Yes, and I would say this. I say it to my daughter, and it's, don't ever let anyone dim your light. You don't, there's naysayers, there's people, you look for that external validation, and especially with social media. I mean, it's like, we do posts and we're, looking for likes and people to,
Mm,
there's as much as, like, I get that, like, and I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like, "Oh, there's no part of me that, doesn't, get that in a little sense." The piece of advice I would offer is, like, especially now as I'm older, there's nothing more important than just genuinely liking and like who you are as a person and not even caring about what the world thinks of you anymore. And that's
Mm.
actually why I started to share that part of my story. It took so long for me to understand that, you know what? If people love me or like me, or if they don't, I don't really care anymore. There's that part of just like I need to be secure and confident in who I am. And once I know that, it's like everyone else it just fades away. And I think that also, like I said, it comes with wisdom because I wouldn't have said this, 10, 20 years ago. When you're younger, you just care about being valid. You want people to like you. And like, as I've grown older, it's like, I am who I am. Like, you are who you are. And like, you don't need to please the world. You just need to look yourself in the mirror and be happy with, who you see, what you see. No one's perfect, right? We all make mistakes. And that's what I go back to this because I felt like what I was sharing, about my story, are people going to like me and are they going to forgive me? Are they going to think differently of me? So own your truth, right? Like, and I wish that I could have done this sooner, right? But I get it. I'm not going to be a hypocrite and say that it's an easy thing to do. It's not. It's not easy at all. But I think that if you're genuinely, yourself, and you connect with people, and you're just real about who you are, and you'll be accepted. And if you're not, and people don't like you or think of you a certain way, let it be.
Every successful person that we know, they've they've gone through so many challenges behind the scenes. We just don't necessarily see it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
we're just so used to posting the positive, the easy stuff, and the hard stuff is it's hard. It's hard. Um, but I could tell you that right now I'm so glad. I feel like a ton of weight lifted off of me. It took me. I'm 45 this year. And it took me a long time to get here. This is 20 years behind me now, right? And it still took me, time to like really believe that it was going to be okay, that I could let this part out and share my full story and maybe, impact a couple of lives and let people out there know who have been in similar circumstances where they felt down, where they felt like there is no turning back and that they've ruined their lives. Like there's still chance, there's still hope. Like don't give up.
And did you always envision building your own practice and brand once you got through law school?
No, you know what? I wanted to be a public defender, and that just didn't happen for me. I couldn't get the job in the public defender's the office. They didn't have the budget to hire me. And
Hmm.
that's why I always fall back to everything happens for a reason. I was working for a friend who started his own practice after a year, and I was like, this guy, if he could do it, why can't I do it? I knew I was competent. I knew I was smart enough and I had proven, that I would do everything by, studying hard, working hard and coming through overcoming all these obstacles. So that's when, like I said, I started the firm was I was like, you know what? I might not be successful, but I'm going to try this. I just took the leap of faith.
Your billboards are instantly recognizable. It's not just billboards either. They're on the sides of buses, you have
Yes.
television commercials, you are
Hmm.
everywhere, girl.
Yes.
When did you start thinking about building a recognizable brand?
2016, which is now 10 years, we've been, branding and marketing the Something Wrong Call Anh Phoong. Um, what I wanted was to be able to serve more people. And I wanted to have people understand that lawyers that look like me are out there in the personal injury PI business. It's a doggy dog. It's so aggressive. And then it was male dominated, let alone, come on, like you didn't see any AAPIs out there on a billboard or TV commercials, right? You
Mhm,
didn't see
mhm.
that. I wanted people to know that I was out there and that there were attorneys and law firms and women lawyers and in PI and that we were aggressive, that we could fight the same. And so when we started, Stephanie, I tell you, the first billboards and TV commercials that came out, the reaction from the community was almost instant. And it
Okay.
wasn't people calling me for accidents. People were calling to say, you know what? My daughter saw your billboard, and I just want to tell you, thank you, because she now wants to go to law school, or you've given my aunt, my niece, encouragement to. I was getting calls of people not wanting to hire me, but people
Mhm.
saying thank you. I would just
Wow.
get calls to say, hey, I don't need you or anything, but like, it's actually really refreshing. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, people, it felt like they were waiting, for
Mhm.
something like me to come and kind of break that mold.
You became almost like a role model
Yeah.
for folks, yeah, and, who
Mm-hmm.
didn't see themselves represented in that
Correct.
space, and I imagine that probably also translated into customers too.
Yeah, they did
Yeah.
eventually, yeah, and I think that the more they saw us, the more they understood. I'm very, very blessed and fortunate that the community responded because of, I took a big risk. We're talking about spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, on my first campaign, and it could have tanked, right?
I wanted to ask you too, what gave you the confidence to take such a big financial risk?
You know, there were days when I was like, yes, and I'm like, hey, if I was going to invest in anything, I'm gonna invest in myself. And so, yeah, it was, I'm not gonna say I did it easily. I was definitely scared, but I definitely think I knew in my heart that it was what we needed in our community.
I would love for you to maybe expand on the idea of taking risks. I think sometimes with overachievers, a lot of folks tend to be perfectionists. And so
Hmm.
there is almost this apprehension about coloring outside the lines too much or taking that big leap of faith. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, as I was coming, when I was thinking about doing this, there was a lot of doubt. Like I said, not just financially, I was also like, are people going to even like what they see? I mean, I'm putting my face out there. I'm putting and there's going to be a lot of, negative remarks. But the other motivation was, if this fails, at least I know that I was putting myself out there. I mean, I come from, I'm Chinese. We love to gamble, right? And so, like, it made sense to gamble on myself. And it made sense that if I was going to tread this line, I'm not going to put it on something else. I'm going to put it in me. And where like I said, to go back to having some control.
What is your advice to someone who wants to expand their business, wants to take their project to the next level, but they're scared to take a big risk, take that leap?
You know what? If it's not a big risk, there's not a big reward. I say take it, go dive fully into it. Obviously, do your homework. Don't blindly go into it. I knew I had the work ethic. I knew that I would make it work. And I knew that our service was good. I don't think it's an easy thing to do, but you can be complacent and just be okay, or you could take the risk and have a huge reward, right? And so take the leap of faith, even though you think you're gonna fall, you might, but you might catch a safety net or you might get to the next step. And so you just don't know. My advice is, take the risk, and it's better to make the jump than, wishing you woulda, coulda, shoulda. Right.
Mhm. Even if things don't 100% work out, it's a learning experience. And then you take what you learn and you pivot and then you make the next version better.
The silver lining is that for sure. Yeah. And like you always try to turn every experience into something positive, right? And learn from it. And then the next time you jump, then it may work then.
What is the role that authenticity plays when you're working to build a recognizable brand?
Think it's everything. I don't try to be someone I'm not. And I think that that's what people had understood too. I don't try to be the other lawyer. I see other billboards, brands, and other attorneys and people doing stuff on social media. I'm like, I'm not going to do something that's not me. You've got to
Yeah.
stay true to who you are. I stand for what I stand for, and you either like it or you don't. And if you don't, there's a next lawyer, there's another law firm that might connect with you better, right? So I think
Mhm.
it's everything. I think, being your true authentic self is everything. And then when it's not authentic, I think people can spot it and people can see it. Don't worry about like what other people are doing. You really have got to like hone in on who you are and understand that like, and I would keep going back to this, but it's like you can't be someone else and fake it. You might be able to fake it for one or two, but the real you is going to come out. Really figure out what it is about you that you love that you want to showcase,
Yeah.
and have that confidence and make sure that that shines. And whether that's completely different or similar to someone else's, who cares, right? It's as long as it's you, as long as that's really you, because that'll come out in everything that you do.
Many high achievers, they feel this internal pressure to constantly move the goalpost, to constantly raise the bar. Is this something that you've personally experienced?
Yeah, that's the hardest part is to like be just be happy with what you have and be grateful. And I struggle with that. That's a really good question because I think, like you said, overachievers, you meet one goal and you're like, oh, you get the high, you're like, yay. And then you're like, okay, what's next? And then
Right.
you set another goal and it's like you go for that. And so yeah, that's a constant struggle. I am now learning not so much moving the goalpost. I still want to be able to achieve things, but I don't want to feel less than if I haven't, if I'm not, right? And so that is definitely a process that I'm still currently going through. We've been expanding. I mean, I took the Nevada bar. After 12 years of no school, I took a 3-day bar again in
Wow.
2024 and I
Good for
passed it.
you.
I don't know
Incredible.
why, but it was there you go again, chasing the thrill. Here's the next, opening up another office, opening in Texas, opening in Nevada. Like, when are you going to stop? And there's parts of me that's like, just be happy and stop moving. But then I don't exactly know how to do that yet.
Mhm.
It feels like it's genetic now, right? Like it's just
Your
in me, but I
DNA.
also,
Yeah.
yeah. And but I also want to just like be able to enjoy and not have that pressure all the time. So I'm trying to find that balance.
How do you manage and navigate the pressure so that it doesn't become overwhelming?
One of the things that I do is, work out, and that helps me with my stress, right? And I've learned to breathe through a lot of the chaos, taking a moment and pausing and understanding that my reactions don't need to be immediate. I don't have to take action right when something happens. And so there's just I always think like, "Oh my god, maybe it'll be calmer next year," or like, "I've got a busy year, busy month, and next month will be" no, 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 no. I have my kids who are still pretty young, 3, 6, and 10, and I tell you, lots of times, at the end of a very high stressful day, I just look forward to decompressing with them and being a silly mom, playing with them, going outside, riding a bike, enjoying nature, taking it outdoors. So just finding those moments of just like shutting it all down and just take a breath and not just even 10, 15 minutes away from all that helps, and then you get to regroup and then you get to just like, okay, you know what? Maybe I don't need to handle this today. The problem will still be there tomorrow. I'm gonna sleep it off and then, gather my thoughts and then we'll take it on then. So that's what I
Mhm.
would say is just to learn how to breathe and just, take a pause and those moments in between. And
Um,
ask for help, obviously. That's a big
yeah.
thing. I wasn't, I would always take on so much. And that's why I say like getting the right people, getting help from people, hiring the right people, like asking for help is so hard for overachievers because we're like, we could do everything. I would pack everything on myself. And as the years have been coming, I'm like, you know what? I don't need to do all this. Out of the 15 things I need to do, maybe I need to do 5.
Many listeners of this podcast, they're ambitious people. They're trying to stand out in a competitive space. What advice would you give them?
Be yourself. You can't be like the next person next to you. Don't try to be them, be yourself. Like I say, for me, competition is welcome. It keeps me on my toes. Because I think that if there is no competition, you get complacent. I always say that it keeps me driven, to know that there's, people out there and someone can be the next something wrong, call Anh Phoong, right?
Mhm, mhm. The idea of authenticity can be so tricky for some people. I think there's so many people out there who are still trying to figure out who they are. What is my authentic voice? How do they discover that?
I think that you really have to take those moments and dig deep and really ask yourself tough questions. What do you enjoy? What do you want? Who do you want to be? How, what speaks to you? And I don't think people give it enough like actual thought, to actually think about, what it is they're passionate about, what is important to them, what drives you. And like a lot of times, we just live life and so the moments that I've had to like take in a pause and really reflect on those issues and I really think about like, who am I? What do I care about? So I would say about several years ago, like 5, 6 years ago, it was around the COVID time. And we had, already started, advertising, became very successful. and I was still really missing something in my life. I realized that there was just this emptiness that came from a sense of not being a part, like the sense of community was missing. I'm successful, but what can I do with this success? How can I be impactful? I was missing that element. And that's when we started doing, a lot of our philanthropy work and giving back to the community. And it's made all the difference because it's really about what am I doing with my life? And
Mhm.
what impact am I making in this world and in this community?
How do you overcome the stereotypes of personal injury lawyer or, being an Asian American woman or even somebody who went through the criminal justice system? How did you overcome the stigmas and stereotypes associated with that as you were building your career?
Yeah, it was really hard. I mean, at first, like, it's not fun when someone's like calls me a greedy lawyer or like I would hear it. I used to get like, oh man, like I had to prove them wrong. Like I was like, you don't know, that's not me. And so as I've grown older, like I that goes back to, like, really being confident in who I am and not trying to convince people I'm something else. People are gonna have their opinions regardless, right? I've never tried to say I've lived a perfect life or led a perfect life and everything's been peachy. I can't please the entire world, and it's almost just like, "F it." I don't care, and it feels good to not care 'cause, obviously for the longest time, I cared, and it prevented me from, sharing some things, but as I am here now, like everything has, played out in a way that has brought me to where I am. I am sitting in my own truth. Not easy for sure. And I could have continued to not share that part. No one needed to know, but it felt like in against my grain.
What is one piece of advice you wish someone had given you earlier?
It's not always gonna be easy, but you'll make it. And I think that um like I said, like it's not easy to continue like, believing yourself, coming from Asian immigrant background, Chinese family, we didn't hear the words, I love you. We didn't hear the words, you're doing a good job. We didn't hear, that kind of affirmation or, I know they loved me. I know my parents did their best. But it'd be nice, to hear that like early on.
Mhm, mhm. Do you do it with your kids now, though?
Oh yeah, of course. Like I tell my daughter all the time, like, so she's in sports and they want to win. Like, like I'm like, you're a baddie, you're beautiful. And even if you don't win, then, when she loses, because of course, there's times when she loses, I sit there and tell her, hey, I'm proud of you. You did your best. As long as you do your best, that's everything.
And this has been such an insightful conversation about ambition, personal courage, vulnerability. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your perspective with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And to everyone listening, if this conversation resonated with you, make sure to follow along, bookmark this episode, subscribe to the O Word for more conversations with incredible people who are redefining ambition and unlocking their greatest potential. And definitely check out Anne's social media. She's got a lot of fun stuff there. And remember, your ambition is not something to shrink, it is something to shape and celebrate. I am Stephanie Lin, and we'll see you next time.